Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here at my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've got a unique project here. I had one of my viewers send me this sketch and asked if I could make this for them. So let's get over here on the workbench. We'll take a close look at this, figure out the approach that I'm going to use, and see if we can get this thing made up. I appreciate you being here in the shop with me today. What we have here is a pouch that is going to carry a slender wallet, kind of like my minimalist wallet, and a cell phone. And it has a shoulder strap here that they would like to be 40 inches long from clip to clip. So there'll be a tab on both sides here, so it can be worn as a crossbody. Well, I guess you could wear it a few different ways, but that's how I envision it first. And she took time to really draw out the height. It says between 7.5 and 8 inches in height, the width between 4 and 4.5 inches, and the thickness between 1 inch and 1.5 inches. So, and she took time to draw in this pattern here. And at first I didn't realize what that was, but there's a leather project that I created a pattern on, and this is that pattern. Let me grab that real quick. I'll show you. So this is the pattern that she had chosen from watching one of my videos. Unfortunately, this pattern on the design is only like 3/8 of an inch. You could maybe stretch it into 1/2 inch wide, but this pattern is 1 inch wide. And I could do just one row of these diamonds without that, but then you kind of lose that look, because I think what she really liked was this. It almost looks like a flower center right there. So we went back and forth with some communication on it. Let me show you some samples I created. Now, don't pick on me too much here. I was just futzing around with some different tools, trying to figure out, something that would look unique here on the edge. And I put together this one here, which is, it's a Berry King stamp. I can't remember now which one. But it's this flower center here with a small cedar here, there. So I'm going to use, that's what she chose. Get some leather goods out. We'll source this, and then we'll get started on that. Here is my first element that I created. I had a little bit of time there. It takes a little bit of time to apply contact adhesive. I put 2 coats to 2 straps, and I've laminated those together. Let me get you the thickness on that. Altogether, we're at 6.5, so slightly over 3 ounce leather on that. The design called for 4 to 4.5 inches wide, and since we lose some on each side for the sewing of the gusset in, I thought I would just go ahead and go with the wider one. And it'll be trimmed and sanded some once I get the gusset on it. And I've got to decide what type of a gusset I want to go with. But what I did is I cut this strip of leather here 4.5 inches. Looks like it's actually slightly more than that. So the next thing is on this part here, I want this, where this top piece of leather comes in at this pocket up here underneath the flap. I know you can't see it there, but I didn't want to leave just a raw edge, so I'm going to fold that over. I'm going to skive a little bit of leather off of it, but the one thing that'll do is it'll help stiffen up the top edge of that pocket and keeping it from wanting to droop as much as well. The flap on the top, I'm going to use 2 layers of this leather, so it'll be sewn and glued together like this on there, and that will keep that flap more rigid. I think that'll work. So I'll have the flap here, then I need to lay out and cut this piece here. I'm not sure what to call that shape there, but it's going to have a tab to go behind here. I need to find a piece of metal, a belt tip to go here, something decorative. And I think that's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by cutting this piece here. since this is, I'm going to go with the 8 inches. It seems like by the time you start shoving phones in here and you have flaps and seams and all that, that it ends up smaller than you would intend. So that's one reason I'm going with the larger sizes on each one of these to help offset that, we'll call it shrinkage with seams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this front piece, and I'm going to cut it 8 inches. I'm going to go actually 8 1/4, and I'm going to fold that front flap down to probably about 7 1/4 on that. So this flap will cover it, but it won't go up in there too far. I think that'll be easier than having a side gusset here that maybe wants to pooch out. So I'll cut that piece, and then the back piece of it as well. I'm going to cut that, just the, you know what, I'll cut them both 8 1/4, and I can do some trimming up here at the top. So let me get these pieces cut out, and then I'll come back here in just a minute. All right, after a little conversation, we decided on golden brown, trying to keep from getting too dark. So I'm going to try to be extra careful not to go over air. For the next step, I traced out this flap shape on some tracing paper, and once I had it traced all the way around, I wanted to make sure it was balanced left to right, so I folded it in the middle like this, and then I chose the side that I liked the look of on the pencil better, because they are slightly different in the drawing, which turned out to be this side, and I cut around that pattern. Doing it this way allowed me to create a pattern that at least starts off balanced side to side. So I did that for the flap that will be sewn on. And then I did that also for this closure part that gets sewn to the flap. After creating this and holding my stamp on there, I modified it slightly. It's not much, but I modified it so that the shape was round on the top part here. This will allow me to center my stamp on there. This is drawn a little larger than my stamp is, and this will allow me to place my stamp on there and then modify that to fit. Now down in here, I left it a little bit fat or wide, I should probably clarify. And I will modify that a little bit here after I get it created. Once I have created this shape in the leather, then I will do a little bit of test fitting with my strap here and with my metal tip that's going to go on there. So there'll be a little bit of modification there. Let me set this out of the way. Then I went ahead and I took and laminated these two pieces of leather that make up for the flap. So it's going to be like that. So what I'll do next is I will just trace around here with my blunt tipped It's actually an ice pick, but I'm going to call it an awl. I'll trace around here, I'll cut that and sand that down to shape. And then this one here makes up the closure part that attaches to the flap. I'll do the same thing on that. I went ahead on this piece and I folded over 3/4 of an inch at the top to get the total length that I wanted here. I'm going to create 2 stitch lines here to sew this flap down here at the top, and it will intersect with the stitch lines that will sew the front of this to the gusset. I'm only mentioning that because when I create those stitch lines, I want to stop at the same distance from the edge here. This is going to be the same distance here, and I'll pick up one of these stitching holes and run that across so that I have 2 parallel lines and it all comes together neatly here. I need to define my shape for the bottom of this crossbody bag, and I'm just looking to see if there's a reason to have one or the other at the bottom for the back, because I'll be trimming a little bit off the top and it looks pretty good there. And I'm going to use this. I'm really trying to follow the design. I think that's good practice for me as well, and it reaches what they're looking for. So this 25mm corner punch is going to be what I'm going to use, or corner knife, I think Weaver refers to it. And I think I've mentioned before, but I saw these same ones at Rocky Mountain Leather Supply. Well, it doesn't say Weaver on it, but it's the same tool there as well. All right. So that will be the shape, and I'll probably use this same shape up here. It's going to come really pretty close to that, but I'll wait and see. I may actually just trace this up here when I get ready to finalize this height and attach this on here. So before I get ahead of myself and start sewing here, the next thing I need to do is to lay out, and I'm just going to scribe it in lightly with my wing divider, where my stitch line is going to go here, and then I will also put in a light mark for my tooling that we're going to use on here. And if you've forgotten, for me this has actually been a few weeks. I was trying to finish it before a trip, and I needed some hardware. So this will be the tool that we use here around this outside edge, and then the cedar goes between it. Divider set at 3/16, which I think works pretty good for the stitch line. I like to keep it fairly tight here with the edge on something that's as small as this. So I'm going to do, let me look at it here, 3/16. I think that's a pretty good distance there. We'll just put a light scribe around here. I'm going to let this moisture soak in a little bit here, and I'll come back in a moment when it returns closer to its color, and I'll do my tooling. I'm going to run a secondary line, and I'm going to be try to be pretty faint-handed here. Need to actually touch the leather though. So next, I want to find the center here. So 4 5/8 is going to be 2 5/16 here. Easier for you to see it this way because I was on the 32nd side. 2 5/16. So the center is going to be there. And then if I set that tool on all that measuring, and then I'm going to eyeball where the center of that tool is. It's there. And I will try not to get too hard. A little bit tipped there. As long as I control that. fairly light taps. There we go. So I have that finished. And here is the strap as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create the holes with my stitching iron around this piece here and this one up to the same line. I'm not going to put holes through the goatskin gusset. I'm going to use an awl and needle to sew that to it. And then I'm going to leave the gusset a little bit long and we'll trim it back even with this part here. Switch to the 2-tine for around the corner here. I'm just going to dimple it here. See how my layout is. By golly, I think that's going to work. Okay, I like it. There we go. I'm going to start here and I'll sew to here and up and over to here, and then I will attach my gusset and I'll sew down around the end and end up back here. I'll have a little bit of overlap there, and to make sure those two look balanced, I'll do back stitches here so that I have the same thickness of thread in each of those. So I'll come back here in a little bit. I'll have created the holes in this one, and I will cut my gusset. Let me show you the gusset. Here's my gusset material. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm just going to put contact adhesive here on this outer part, and I will put contact adhesive here and keep it in that same distance from the edge. These two edges will be then put on here and tapped together. And then I will come back and I will finish out the holes with the stitching awl and needle and thread. And this will be a little bit fat, and I can fit the tip on here. We'll get it cut out and I can do finish sanding to get the tip on. I need to get this tip out here and see. It's pretty narrow here, isn't it? It's going to go about there. Hard for you to see, but I can see where my pencil line is here. I'll refine that a little bit. Looks pretty good. Trying to get my shadow off of here. I can see my pencil line. and I can sand visually and get them in line with each other. Yeah. I've got a little more refining to do here, but this gets me what I need for this part of the equation. I like this little lip here. I think it'll help, you know, give a little resistance for when that is in there. I got to think about the fact that this is going to have a gusset here, which is going to make this fatter here, which is going to bring this part further up because it's going to come out and around and down. So I'm going to bring that up to about there, I think. I know, I got caught working off of the camera a bit here. I'll catch up to where we're at and I'll explain why that happened. I went ahead and I put a coat of Resolene on here. I found in the past that whenever I have something like this on here, it can be a challenge to get the Resolene around there. So I went ahead and put Resolene on these, and when I got started, I kept going. Partially, it was some therapy. Let me move the camera around here. Yeah. Yep, it was kind of one of those moments, and I needed to get back to just focus on what I was doing here. A little therapy to get something done. So I think I'm ready here. I was trying to decide whether or not to attach my D-rings before I sew the gusset into here or after. It wouldn't be terrible to do after because there'll be so few stitches in here. I'm kind of in the mindset to do it before. The only reason why I wouldn't do it before is if I had problems lining up my edges here. And that's a bigger issue around the curve here. I typically end up, you know, with a little bit of this sticking out so I can trim it and get it nice and smooth. But I think I'm going to go ahead and sew the D-rings on here before I sew it into here. And I want to show you, I ended up going ahead and using the same veg-tan goatskin here that I used for the gusset to make these. And to make sure that it was plenty strong, it's probably plenty strong, but I went ahead and I used some double-sided tape and I put this material in here. This is some material I bought at the local fabric store. It's actually patching material. Comes in like a 4 by 6 inch piece that you would use, say, to patch the inside of your jeans. And I just cut it into a strip there. Works really good, in my opinion, to strengthen this bit of leather up here. It'll help keep it from stretching, and a lot of times when something like this stretches, it wants to narrow, and I don't think that looks as good. So I think this will help stabilize that as well. So I think I'll go ahead and set up. I'll sew the D-rings. Obviously, I want to remember to put the D-rings in here before I sew this tab over. And in the past, when I first started, I would stack these like here when I would sew that on. It makes a bigger lip here. So what I've done the last few times is I shift it here about the allowance I'm going to have for my stitching. So the stitching along the side here will be through both layers, but in this tip point it'll be one layer, and that'll give me a smoother transition here there. So I'm going to set up, I'm going to do that, and I'll go ahead and sew this keeper on here that this tucks into. And instead of trying to get it tip this way while I'm trying to hold both ends. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this one down. Now I can measure here and see I have 1 3/8 inches, and I can pinch it now to that same spot. I know, a lot of thread. As you can see, it was drawn with this all the way up here at the top. This flap up here is going to be attached to the back. It's not going to be attached to the gusset. Because of that, this gusset's actually going to stop down here a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and create it to where this is close to the top here. And by the time you end up clipping on here, the handle will be, or the clasp will be pretty much at the top of the bag. I think that will achieve the look that they were looking for there, but yet give me something stable here as well. So if this gusset stops here, which it does, and we attach the hardware here, you can see we can get really pretty close to what they were desiring here. This is really pretty soft, pliable leather. So if I need to get some stretch, I can. If I need to bunch it some, I think I can do that as well. So we're gonna roll the dice here. I think it'll come out okay. So I'm gonna work it to where, you know what, this is probably gonna stretch a little bit. Let me bring it down about there. What do you think? Should I do more stitching here, or is that enough? I'm going to do one more stitch up on both sides. Why did I move it over here? In case I get any misalignment here from shifting around, I can obviously make the leather do what I needed to do here, but I figured if I moved it over here, I'd have less chance of a elongated hole or such. Here. And we will tie a square knot. Let's talk a little bit about the stitching. I snugged them, but I didn't like crank down on them. It'd be easy to wrinkle this softer leather here. So I snugged them down pretty good because I want it to stay pretty well, you know, in place here as it's being worn. So just thinking, am I forgetting something here? I've got that sewn on, that's the only stitching there. I have this to stitch. I will stitch around here and then continue around. So I guess there's not a good reason not to do that stitching first, right? I can do here, here, and here, and then I'll apply contact adhesive and we can sew this in place. I think that's probably the best move. So I usually like to stitch with my finished side on the right, and I'm stitching this one this direction first because I want to end up over here so that when I then turn this and I'm sewing the gusset on, I'm starting here with it on my right hand side. I think that makes sense. Some people like to know those details. There is a rhyme or reason for where I started. Is it correct? We'll find out, but that's why I did it the way I did. When we started to look at the color choices for this item and the tooling, I was concerned that the beige colored thread along this edge would really overpower the tooling design, and I thought black would be better there. When we get to the flap though, there was no tooling chosen for that part of the project. So it's the flap is gonna have this beige color, which gives a little definition to the flap, and that's the design, you know, features on the flap is gonna be that stitching. So that's why we're using black, is it I think will not really compete a lot with this floral stamping here. All right, I'm set up in here. I have the gusset attached here. I put 2 coats of contact adhesive on it. I made sure that if anything that the gusset was standing proud of this, because any trim work that I want to do, I don't want to touch this front leather since everything is set to that edge. And I thought I recorded doing that. User error again. I'm going to reset this a little lower here. It's a little high for this type of stitching. I don't do a lot of sewing with a needle and awl, and I realize there's a lot of people out there that's the only way they do it. But I do get people occasionally ask me how I keep from piercing the thread, and I'm pulling here to try to keep it out of the way. But before I bring this over to the other side, I actually pull a little bit to make sure I'm not pierced on that needle, because if I am, it would be easy just to pull it off at that point. It is sharp. I thought that the one that I reconditioned that I had sharp, but I did not have that sharp at all, not in comparison. I'll work along here, get this stitched up, and then we'll come back And since I didn't do a good job of showing you, or didn't do it at all, showing you how I attach it, when I get the other one contact adhesive on it, then I will bring you along as I install that. I have the front of it sewn. I've obviously got some edge dye to do. And I know someone's going to say, why haven't you sealed the inside? I want to make sure I get really good penetration on the leather on these edges here. And I can get my hand in there with a sponge and I'll put Resolene on the inside of it here. And that's mainly to keep, if there's anything in there, you know, that gets it dirty, help keep it from getting as dirty. The next thing I did is I laid this on here and transferred marks onto here where to apply the contact adhesive to. Next, I'll take some Weldwood. Don't need a whole lot on here. It's easier to control with less. It's the saying, less is more control anyway. Up to that mark and just as far as the stitches. It might weep over a little bit past there, but I want to keep it so that I don't have contact adhesive exposed on the inside. Almost went right on past my mark. I get thinking about other things. Set that one aside, and I'm just going to do the same thing on here. Looking for that same amount of contact adhesive. It's about 3/16 of an inch. Just put that on there to give it a little weight. I don't want to flip over on this clean leather on the inside. I'll let that set up, and I'll come back and do the same thing again. And when I have two coats on, I'll come back when I'm ready to apply these together. Those actually help keep that out of the way. You could start here up at the top and work your way around, but you may end up with it twisted on there. My easiest way is to start in the bottom center here and go the other direction. So that's what I'm going to do. And it would have been smart to mark where the center was before I got started. But I never claimed to be the smartest when it came to that. And if anything, I want the gusset exposed here at the edge. I want to trim gusset, not the back, if any trimming at all. The first purse I made, I had to take apart a couple of times, trying to create the holes and then line it up. And then when you go to stand the bag, it wants to sit wonky as a result of not being lined up right. Yes, you can ask other Leathercraft people, wonky is a technical term. I know, these stand out, but I don't think it'll stand out as much once I get the rest of it on there. And this piece here looks lighter, and a lot of times when you start flexing it, it lightens up how it looks. I'm hoping that with some wear, those are gonna match. That's gonna drive me nuts if not. 25. On each side here. A little short of that mark. Let me see what this 30 looks like. Next step. I do have lots of edge work to do here, but I can do that once I get this next step taken care of. So I'm going to attach this. We talked about that earlier. Going to sew from here to here through this back piece of leather, and like that. This piece is going to get sewn on here. I've got some little marks here so I can see and show you where it's going to go. And we're going to talk a little bit about how I want to hide my stitches, but it's going to be like that. So what I'm going to do is I will create the stitching around this and then sew this to that. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge because to create that stitching around there, I will have it then already attached to the bag. But I believe that once I get that done, I can flip the flap this way. It'll be like here. And I can work off the edge of the countertop too if I need to, and create the holes and stitch that on there. So that'll be my next step. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my stitching holes around here, and then I'll use an awl up on this part to create the holes where I attach it to the back. I will stitch from here all the way around and end here without a back stitch with just a simple knot here, and that will be hidden by this piece on top of it here. I'm just going to be lazy. Go ahead and create these holes. So all I did was stepped out, made sure those aligned, created those holes, and then after I had this lined up, I used my awl to mark the holes, and then I created holes in that back leather. So I started stitching here, and I'm glad I switched over to here because otherwise I wouldn't have had any of it recorded. And I'm not sure this is a whole lot easier. This bag's kind of in my way. But I thought maybe we'd take some of the moving parts out of the equation here. I'm just curious to see how that's going to look. I think that's pretty good. I think with it straight up here, and I've got paper stuffed in there to kind of represent the full size of it. This is down here far enough that helps to catch and hold. Let's take a look here. I want to work on this strap a little bit next. These are going to be my bolt clasp that I'm going to use. I'm going to use these mini Chicago screws that I purchased from the buckle guy. I've used these on a few things. I like them. There's areas that I like to use a Chicago screw. Well, you guys know me. I use Chicago screws in a lot of areas that other people maybe use a post rivet or a double cap, but I use it because I like it. So, but anyway, I like this smaller version. It's a little more of a sleek fit and look in my mind. Use my typical thread lock, clear fingernail polish. And this has a little bit of a different adjustment to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install this. And I should have installed this before I put the other end on. It would have made it easier. But I like doing things the hard way at times. So this piece of hardware, I guess I should show you, it's actually a center bar buckle, and I took the tongue out of it. This was the shape I wanted in the size that I wanted, 5/8, and I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for, so I went this direction here. So the way I'm going to do this is put this through here. Like I said, it would have been easier had I installed this before that other end, and then I would have been able to do it without futzing around here, but I'll get her done. It's got to be more challenging than that for me not to get it completed. And I think I want to go around the other way. I want to have a similar fold back on this hardware. Planes are flying low today. I know, doing it the hard way. But I'll get her done. Should have put this hardware on first, then I wouldn't have had to deal with it like this, but like I said, we get her done. And it said 40 inches clip to clip. Let me grab my tape measure and we'll get this set right. Yeah, pretty good guess. Just slide this down just a hair. The next thing I need to do is work on these edges here. And what I've found in the past, especially on something as soft-tempered as the goat skin, it's really hard to get a smooth, rounded edge. And one of the things that I have found that helps is for me to apply dye to the edges, and then the Resolene on it, which will stiffen this edge up, and then I can do some sanding. I know that sounds counter to the way you want to do it, but this stuff is so soft that if I, even with a 400 grit sandpaper, I start sanding on here, it just mushes out of the way. If I try to edge it, it does pretty much the same. But when I get the dye on here and then I put some Resolene, I'm just going to put it on the edges. It'll stiffen that up and allow me to trim that. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and get some dye on here and some Resolene on there, and I'll come back when I get ready to do the edge work here, and I'll show you well, the way I hope it works out. It has in the past. So I'll be back here in just a little bit. All right, so I let it dry overnight, and I already took and ran a number 1 Ron's edger around these edges and took a little bit of the edge off of here. But I find that the Resolene really helps to firm up the leather, and it helped even here on this really lightweight and flexible goat skin. I was able to get a skive around here, and now I'll take and I'll sand this. And I find, especially on the softer leathers like that, I just sand in one direction. and I'll work on the bevel or rounded part of it here as well. And I'm just doing my initial sanding and slicking here. If it's got some dips to it and you want to try to keep from not making the dip deeper, if you wrap it around a hard surface like this stick here, the sandpaper, and this is some 320 here that I'm using. It helps keep from making that dip deeper, taking off or focusing on the high spots. And I'll just check it here and make sure it's smooth. I know the color's not even. Don't worry about that. What I'll do is I'll get out the dye and I'll go back over it one more time here and even that out once I get the sanding done. Once the color is even on here, I will go ahead and put another coat of Resolene on it and then decide after that dries, do I want to repeat the process again. Be careful of this folded leather there, you don't want to scuff that. I think we're ready for an application of dye. Let me set up for that and I'll show you how I apply that. Alright, this is the ProDye in golden brown. I'll use a Q-tip here and I'm just going to, I guess, firm this up a little bit, how tight it's on there. And instead of pressing on the bigger part of this, I'll start down here at the base and it'll wick dye down to there, and this gives me a chance to further control what I'm doing where I don't end up with potentially a large amount of dye where I don't want it. And now that I have used up some of the dye there's not as much in there, I'll just very lightly run it here on this inside. And I'll run over this edge a couple of times. Somebody asked me why I work on top of this cardboard. I do that so if I have any little drips or whatever, I don't end up with a spot of it on the countertop that gets transferred to the next project that I set down here. I'm able to move that dye out of the way. Once this dries, I will actually take some denim and run over it to slick it down a little bit. The dye, I think, stiffens the fibers up a little bit. And once those fibers are dry, then I'm able to slick them down a little bit, and then I'll put a coat of Resolene on here. Let's take a look at my project now. This is the shoulder strap. I put a floral design. I played with along one side to see how that looks. So I guess we'll see what my client thinks. And it's adjustable. It's got fixed on one end here, and then this will slide and we can adjust this. About 10 inches longer. And obviously you could make it half the length of the overall strap length by bringing this all the way around the other side. So depending on how the person wants to wear it, it's set to go that way. Here's the completed pouch here. Let me check. I put some fingernail polish on here to make sure that the little set in there didn't come out. I want to make sure it wasn't tacky. And I think the edges turned out nice. It's kind of narrow. I don't know if you can see the sheen on there or not, but there is a sheen on the edges there. I put one more touch-up of dye on there. I don't remember if I showed that or not. And then I put one last coat of Resolene on everything, including the inside. And Yeah, I'll ship it with the paper in there so it holds its shape. All right, let's put the strap on. I've given this some thought. I think I like it on here this direction so that it's somewhat smooth here if it rubs on the flap. If you had it turned around the other way, it would catch on the bolt there. So I'll bring it around and do the same thing here on the other side. Like that. So I think that looks good. It closes here. So it's pretty full with paper to try to give an idea what it would look like if it's full. I wanted to make sure we had plenty of tuck underneath of there, and I think we do. And I think what works best to open it is just to push up with your finger and then like that. So I guess I won't know until I send it and see what they think of the bag, but I think it turned out really pretty nice. There's a lot of room in there. It's according to the specification. And speaking of that, let's grab that paperwork. So here we go. This is what we were looking for, and that's what we have there. 4 to 4.5, and I'm actually about a 1/16 over on the width. Overall 7.5 to 8. I'm 8 1/4. You know, that's one thing about making bags like this. It's so easy to end up over. I had originally planned on trimming a little bit on this height here, but I wanted to make sure that with that flap closed that it had the right lie there, that it laid properly. I was afraid that if I made that shorter that it may not hook in there right. So we are a little bit large there. And the strap is set to 40 inches, which is what was asked for. Let's turn the camera around here and let's wrap this up. Well, there you go, another finished project. I tell you what, I think it turned out really pretty nice. I like the floral pattern here. It's a Barry King stamp there. And I know my maker's mark is pretty prominent. That's exactly where she had drawn it there. And she had it drawn a little larger, but this is the size of my maker's mark. And I think it looks pretty good on there. I like the floral. I like the black thread. I like dressing up the flap here with the light colored thread. If that's not your thing, then obviously you could do something different there. You could do some type of a tool design on there as well. There's so many ways to customize this. You could do a different colored gusset. But I think with what we were asked to make, let's get one more final look at that. I think with what we were asked to make, I think it's really pretty close. That is one thing about making purses. I've had quite a few people ask me, this is a cell phone purse, pouch, whatever you want to call it. But I've had people ask me about making purses to order. And my feeling is that unless the person's got some flexibility on sizes, it's sometimes hard, for me at least, to hit exactly what they're looking for. So kind of my canned answer is I make them. I typically make a few over the wintertime. I put them on my artisan booth. If you like it, buy that. But, you know, I have had people like, can you make it about a 1/2 inch wider and a 1/4 inch thinner? And I would just soon not do that. I think, you know, I'm a belt guy making other items. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. I appreciate you being with me in the shop today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you have a great day.